Thank you for watching Mike's in the Garden. We are here with Isabel from the Florida Freedom Family, and today's episode is going to be a little bit different. Isabel has an amazing family history and doing a lot of great work here in the state of Florida. So Isabel, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. If you can introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Florida Freedom Family.
Florida Freedom Family was essentially started just before session started last year. We began because we just didn't see any groups in the state of Florida, focused on the state of Florida, who wanted to actually advance real liberty. We saw a ton of freedom or liberty groups pop up after the pandemic, and they seem to either have so much chaos within the group, so many disagreements within the group, or they just went in lockstep with the Republican Party that they weren't actually making any kind of freedom advance. And so then right before session started, we made t-shirts, we built a website, and we went up to Tallahassee and we were like, we're going to do something about it. And we got through session, and then right after session ended, we were like, we're going to move forward now with the Florida Freedom Family. So essentially what we're doing is we're starting our foundation, which is the basics. So we're starting a foundation of tribes of 5 close friends within 5 miles of their homes. So you have people that you can depend on. If everything hits the fan, people who are close by who will show up for you. And then that leads out to the village, which would be no more than 200 people within a 10-mile radius of your home. And then that connects to the whole entire state. So you have a whole entire community throughout the state is our goal. And
That's great. We were talking briefly about how to get these communities together. So what are some of the struggles you're dealing with, and also with some of the other parents and groups that you're talking with trying to get these communities formed?
Yeah, so a lot of it has just been people feel so disconnected from each other that they're like, where do I even start? I don't even know someone who's freedom-minded within 5 miles of my home. Like, the closest person I know is 10 miles away. So then we decided that we were going to start this summer when we began with something called the Kindness Challenge. So it's actually based on a book called The Kindness Challenge. Okay. But it's a 30-day challenge where you're just like throwing tons of kindness at specific people that you want to better your relationship with them. Because right now so many people are so isolated that it used to be that we were just mean to each other online, but in person we were okay.
Sure.
Now we're even mean to each other in person. So now we're like, okay, we're going to start out with kindness. That's going to be our foundation. Then we moved on to a parenting book that's actually based off of how hunter-gatherer tribes live within community overseas. And so you're relearning how to parent, but parent correctly, because like we have 100 different types of parenting in this country. Like that's part of what keeps families separated from each other, because this family parents this one way, another family parents another way, and we're like, this is the type of parenting that is universal. Like people in Bolivia can hang out with people from France who can hang out with a hunter-gatherer tribe in Africa, and they have 80% of their parenting in common because it's based on that. And then you also get to see the community aspect of it and how they help each other with their parenting. Right. And then it ends with a book. You choose either one or the other. One is called Find Your People. It's very religious. Or you can read a book called Build Your Village. They're both basically the same type of book. These are the type of people that you're looking for to be in your tribe. And here's several different ways of finding them, and here's kind of the ups and downs that you're going to go through. And then while we were reading that book, everyone's goal was to buy a fire pit, because in the Hunt Gather Parent book and also in the Find Your People book, people are gathering around fires like humans have been since the beginning of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your family history and what has driven you to be so freedom-minded and oriented?
Yeah.
Because I think from what I know about your family's history, it certainly led you down this path.
So my family was actually in Spain during the Spanish Inquisition, and they started killing off my family. And so they changed their last name, they hung a pig on their front porch, and they got out. They went down to what is now Bolivia, and they were happy down there. They were fine down there. And then they started to see that the government started doing a lot of things that were causing a lot of division among the society, and socialism was creeping in. And my family at the time, they were called free market capitalists. Today, most of them would be called libertarians. They went out and they got themselves elected. I mean, we had mayors, we had a couple of Supreme Court justices, we had ambassadors. we had all these people in our family that were like, we're going to get elected and we're going to try and change government for the better. And unfortunately, socialism is what ended up winning. And so we had to get out. We had to. Or, I mean, people were showing up on our family's property who meant to do very horrible things to my family. So we had to be able to defend ourselves. There were times where my grandfather open carried rifles to show that he wasn't going to take anything. And we got out. And yeah.
And you came here?
Yeah, so my family came here. So I'm first generation born here.
Okay.
And my husband escaped socialism when he was 11 because the Socialist Army would start recruiting boys at the age of 12. So in order for him to not be forced to join an army, they left too.
And where was that?
That was in Nicaragua.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is where my family comes from, and we know that all this division that's happening right now in this country is going to be the foundation for bringing in communism. And so what we have to do now is we have to figure out how to start working together and get over our differences and find ways to trust each other again and move forward, or communism is going to win here.
Yeah, it's interesting because, socialism's the first step to communism.
Yep.
And I think if you look at South American countries, Bolivia, Nicaragua, Chile,
Yeah.
the socialism there is a lot different than the socialism here.
Mm-hmm.
And, I guess from the history that I know and the way I interpret it, FDR, we pretty much had socialism since FDR.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
The New Deal, Social Security, welfare. Now we have, Department of Education, our schooling system, police, fire. I mean, people don't realize that these are forms of socialism. We're paying into things that, we don't necessarily need or use.
Yep.
And we're forced to do it.
Yes.
And there's nothing that says we can opt out. And so that is socialism, however you want to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the disconnect is with, our society today and the socialism from Bolivia, Nicaragua, and the socialism, because people, Republicans go, they're trying to bring in socialism, and then they say we need $1 trillion military budget.
Yeah, I know.
Which is like socialism on steroids.
Yes.
So, what do you think, from your experience, is the
Yeah.
big disconnect between the socialism we see and have here today, which is, I think we're pretty much already socialist, leading towards communism,
Oh yeah, for sure.
and what your family experienced in Bolivia?
Yeah, so I think in Bolivia, we just had, I think they just brought it in faster was really the difference.
Okay.
They started bringing in the division a lot faster between the miners and the working class and the people who are upper class. And then they started just bringing in faster the race cards, you know what I mean? And here I feel like it's been this very, very slow progress. And so people here still believe that somehow our Constitution is going to protect us. And since it's been so slow, they're like, well, it still isn't bad enough. It's like, what do they call it? The boiling pot, and the frog gets boiled in it, and then by the time they realize that they're being boiled, they don't have enough strength left in them to jump out.
Right.
Yeah. And so I that's what I really believe is happening here. And so much stuff has been, freedom has been screamed so many times in this country, and people have gone out and voted for something that they thought was freedom.
Right.
That they're having to deal with all of that now, and they don't, and it's hard for them to take it all in and to realize, even some people who are now starting to realize that, I might have been part of the problem with things that I helped vote for. They have shame with it, or whatever it is that's going on. It's I mean, we have to deal with it no matter what, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, that's a big part of it, I think, is waking up in the right order and understanding, like, okay, I was a part of the problem, or realizing that, hey, my guy doesn't really have our interests at
Yeah.
heart, and whether he's got an R or a D next to his name, they're on team government.
Yes.
So yeah, can one guy make things better than the other? Sure, but at the end of the day, like, the government keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We keep losing more and more of our rights. A piece of paper called the Constitution 250 years ago might have been a great thing, but you and I weren't around to view that. You probably wouldn't have been able to vote then, and since I own
Right.
property, I probably could have been able to vote, but it was really a small amount of people that the Constitution even really pertained to. And put the Constitution aside, because the government has pretty much stepped on every single one of those. So
Every single one of those. Yeah.
a piece of paper means nothing. So
Yeah.
that's really what brings back to finding your tribe. And the future doesn't look great, so we can really just focus on what we can do with ourselves and our close-knit community.
Yeah.
And so that's what you're doing with Florida Freedom Family.
Yeah, that's essentially what we're doing. We want to start out with having our tribes and then having our villages. And then as we have enough people working together, I mean, we can be prepping together, we can be gardening together, all that stuff is great to be doing. But there is going to come a point where we're going to have to fight back. And personally, I'd rather fight back right now when it's not going to be a violent option, than in the future where, war is hell. And I don't want to have to go through that.
Right.
Yeah.
And how old is your oldest?
15.
15, yeah. So, and these could be wars in Israel and Ukraine against China, Russia,
Yes.
Iran.
Yes.
And recruitment levels are down, so very, very easily they can enact a draft again and conscript your kids to go fight in something that has no effect on us, really.
Yeah.
So in Bolivia, was it more of like a military takeover that brought in socialism? Or?
Yeah. So that was actually my uncle. He was a democratic socialist. He was also the general of the army, and he came in as president, and he started just taking away people's lands and saying, well, because again, there was the working class thing, and then there was the racism thing, right? And so then he would come in and he would just take lands, and he would say, well, so and so from your family just enjoyed the labor of the people with the darker skin, basically, and so now we're going to take this much land from you, and they would just take it. And he did eventually have to leave. He heard that a coup was coming in. He was assassinated in another country, but I mean the military can just come in and just start taking over at a moment's notice. And what do we have here now in the country? We have a military that has way more weapons than we do.
Sure.
Like our founding fathers wrote that Constitution with the idea that we were all going to have the same weapons.
Right.
And now it's like our military has these planes that none of us could even imagine having in our backyard.
Yeah.
And so I just see so much of the same things that are happening here. And it's scary.
It is scary. Yeah, not to mention the drone warfare. They could send a drone over here right now, and
Yeah.
and I think we've outsourced our military so much that they have no idea what the capabilities of our military or police and how easily. You look at mask mandates here in Orange County.
Yes.
Vaccine mandates. The police are the ones enforcing those. So, I think. Let me ask you this: Why is socialism so bad? Because if anyone watching this says, oh, well, police, fire, schools, like those are all good things. Like, why is it bad? Socialism.
Yeah, so what it is that you end up seeing with socialism, and I guarantee you we've all seen this so far, is that it literally makes people dumber. And so when you make people so dumb that they've become so reliant on all the systems that have been created that they cannot possibly think for themselves. And we're seeing that today. There are YouTube videos out there where they go on college campuses. They ask the college students to point to one country on a worldwide map. Like, they should at least be able to point to the United States. They can't do it. And so the socialism puts everything in there for you. Daddy government's taking care of you everywhere. It makes you dumb. It makes you so dumb that it's gotten to the point where, I mean, all over South America, they will say socialism is a disease because it's like it's taken over your brain and you can't think anymore. And we're seeing that today. There are kids who cannot think anymore. And so you can't think, and then all this other stuff comes in. Then the government just starts taking over all these industries, and they'll say, well, it's because they were charging you too much for the light in your house. So now we're going to take over that industry. And they just start taking over all the industries, and now they've taken everything over. They don't know how to run a business because they're government. They're just leeches. And now all these businesses are being run into the ground, and now you can't depend on any of it, and you don't know how to do things for yourself because you got dumbed down. And now society goes into complete chaos. I mean, socialism is literally coming into this country now as a disease, and people can't think, they can't do, they can't reason. And then the goal of socialism is communism. And then communism just takes over. And then people suffer and die, and they starve to death.
Yeah, it's like you said, on the college campuses, they think the government should solve every problem, and not realizing the government's the cause of most of the problems. And
yes,
not only that, it's like, oh, well, it's fine because it's happening to someone else, and they're not out there in the workforce. They're not seeing their income tax taken out of their paycheck. They're not experiencing inflation because, for the most part, mommy and daddy are probably paying for most things, and and what they're being taught in the schools, especially the colleges. I mean, it seems like, from what I hear and experience, it's cultural Marxism. Right?
Yeah.
So you know, and it's just the next generation of brainwashing that is going to have to, you know, we're going to have to deal with that in 10, 20 years. So can you talk a little bit about the activism you do, going to, you know, city council meetings in Tallahassee, and what, you know, you can suggest to some of our viewers that they can stand up and do?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, the simplest thing is just at your own local level, right? So if you're really upset about what the schools are doing and that's the thing you're most passionate about, then show up to the school board meetings and start learning when they have their school board meetings. They normally post what's the agenda, like, just a few days in advance because they don't want anyone to be prepared. But you can do that. You can go to the city council meetings. If the county level is what really bothers you, I mean, that's what bothers me the most because that's where the mask mandate came on for Orange County. Then show up to those meetings. Again, they'll post the times, and they will probably be at the worst times possible. But if you can figure out a way to get there. You know what I mean? And just be ready to speak about a subject every single time. I've encouraged people, like, if you're part of a group, like, make sure you're always wearing that group's t-shirt when you're going up to speak, so then people know, okay, well, there's a group out there and they're going to hold us accountable, or some, you know what I mean? And then and if you're going up to Tallahassee, a lot of people think you have to dress up. It's a 4-hour drive, so if you do not want to be dressed up for those 4-hour drives, I mean, I wear t-shirts and jeans, but it's always Florida Freedom Family t-shirt. And the t-shirts are respected up there, you know, it's a whole group. So as we start meeting more people who are also doing those types of things, then we can start getting more and more people at those events or at those meetings or up in Tallahassee, and where we can really get people, like, take Tallahassee for example, where we can get them to really fear us is when we start showing up in massive numbers. So if they're going to vote on something that's absolutely insane, that should not go through at all, right? People will, like, you know, do one phone call up there. Right? I'm like, no, you need to have at least 2,000 phone calls go through. You need to get them to the point where they're unplugging their phone, because then they start to fear you. Because now they're like, all these people are going to be upset. Then if they still vote through that thing in the House, and now it's going up to the Senate, and now you've got a few thousand people who are now door knocking in certain senators' districts, because you know that they haven't decided yet on that vote, then that senator's going to get mad that you're door knocking in their district. And then you start with the 2,000 phone calls a day. And they're going to start to get the point that they have to move in our direction, or they're going to lose their reelection. And that's the one thing that they fear. They're like the popular kid in high school, right? They have to stay being popular, or they don't know what to do with their lives. They don't have that much to them. Right. So if we start taking back our own power and saying, no, we're going to publicly shame you to the point that if you keep on doing all these bad things, we're even going to run someone against you who's from our group, then they're actually going to be scared of us. And that's the whole goal of everything that we're doing. We're trying to find the people who are willing to do all of that and drive them absolutely crazy.
I struggle with, I don't know if you take on a label. I was a libertarian for a long time. Now I just consider myself an anarchist or a voluntarist.
Yeah.
And I try not to personally waste too much time on the body politic. Really, because I've just got other things to do with my time, and I know that's part of the problem. Is, like you said, it's at a time that's probably not convenient for parents to go and speak out, and so, like, you're very outspoken. You have history, and you can talk about these things where I think a lot of people, they can get intimidated when they get up there. It's their time to speak. And so I guess my question would be, what do you think about, just disassociating from the system? And, because even libertarians, when they do run, like, how many sitting senators or, representatives do we have? I think it's less than a handful. I interviewed Dennis, and that's how we connected last year. And Dennis seems like a nice guy. I only met him once, and he seems to push libertarian principles. But the people that are so-called freedom-minded, the right, the Reds, the Republicans, they seem to be the biggest obstacle to actual freedom, and they think their guy is going to be on their side. And is it always, I shouldn't say always, do you still see it worth running libertarians? And certainly voting on a local level can make a difference, but for a state senator or a governor, do you waste your time, or do you still vote?
I still do vote. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because what I do know about politicians, because I've had them in my own family, is that even after the voting takes place, they will go and check who all voted. Okay. And so, like we had an election going on here in my district, and there was only a Republican or a Democrat. I didn't like either one of them. And so I went in and I voted on issues. I voted for the two guys that I was happy to vote for, and I just left them both blank. And I'm like, it still is a way of telling them that they aren't good enough down to voting day. And so for me, worth it, because I'm like, anything that kind of picks at their ego a little bit, I'm happy to do it. But for your question, for the local level up to the state, national level, we would need to be doing an incredible amount of work and have an incredible amount of community in order to run someone like Dennis for U.S. Senate, right? We're going up against $100 million is what the R's and D's are raising to run those guys, right? And we don't have the community set up yet. The R's and D's have people in every single county who can be setting out signs, who can be door knocking. I mean, they've got all of that set up and going. And libertarians don't yet have that connection. Like, we claim that the community should make the decisions and not the government, but we ourselves don't have community. And so we do need to shift it first. So the first thing I'm telling libertarians is, like, if you want to just start making a flash in the pan, start moving things, right? Find 5 people who will be very dedicated to you to run for school board or city council. Just a little thing, right? Find your 5 people. You also need to make sure that you're properly ready. There's a program called I-360 that the other 2 groups, they use it all the time to know who is their swing voter that they can get to swing for a certain election. We should be using that too. And we should only be door knocking on those doors. I see libertarians door knocking on like every neighborhood, on every single door. And I'm like, half of those people don't even vote. Why are you even wasting time on that door? You know what I mean? So we need to be putting into play a lot of the things that actually goes into winning an election. And I very rarely see a libertarian in the United States actually doing that. I'm seeing it in Argentina, because Argentina might actually elect a libertarian for president next week. Yeah. But I'm not seeing it happening here. But I think as soon as libertarians figure this out here, then we can actually be unstoppable if we also have our community built up underneath us.
Yeah, and I think, the biggest problem with libertarians is getting in each other's way. And,
yes.
well, I don't like this guy. Well, okay, you and I disagree on many things, right? But I still appreciate that you're out there doing things, right? I'm not going to get in somebody's way if they're trying to make a difference. And so, I think that's the problem, I think they call them lolbatarians, LOL-batarians.
Yeah.
Where they've, it's like, fuck the system, but everybody can still do what they want, like non-aggression principle on steroids, right? So, let's talk about unschooling. And how you're trying to unwind and reverse. Have your kids ever been in public schools?
No, never.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's really good.
Yes.
But you must work with and talk to other families that have kids that are in public schools. So how do you talk to them about unschooling and homeschooling?
Yeah, it's difficult. A lot of the parents just have become so used to the government method of teaching, and they feel so, I don't know, they're not capable. They feel like they're not capable of teaching because they went to a government school that didn't teach them properly, and then they didn't really learn the subject properly. You know what I mean? It's like, It's like this cyclical problem that we're having here. And then on top of it, I think a lot of the parents are not seeing that the government took over really raising these children. They have these children for so many hours a day that they took over raising the kids. And so if they come home and home is totally different than what school is, then of course they're going to have all this conflict. And they're not putting it all together that, like, really to be able to unschool well, you need to be able to parent well. That's really what it comes down to. So, like, I'm telling people, go out and get Hunt, Gather, Parent. Get the French parenting book. Find these ways that people all over the world use to have really great connections with your kids. And then the unschooling can just come out of that, right? Because as you start to learn how to parent yourself, like most parents in this country, they don't start their children learning to do chores until they're older. But in other countries, children start it too. They start doing chores. No one puts a screen in front of them and tells them, you're too important to do any chores. But we're doing that here. And so as the kids just start getting used to, we do all this stuff as a family, then you can say, hey, I'm curious about this subject. And, why don't we focus on that? And all of a sudden you're unschooling. And the kids are actually having fun. They remember way more than what they'll ever learn. Sure. Out of a lesson at a government school.
Sure.
And then as they get older, they can just keep on pursuing the path. You know what I mean? And it really does become easier, but you have to put in the time and you have to put in the connections with your kids. And I do think a lot of the people who have sent their children to the government schools, they were trying to do their best. But they just need to learn other methods of doing it, and they just got to get in there and do it.
Right.
they'll be able to do great.
This is a gardening channel, so
Yes.
I guess let's talk a little bit about like gardening and prepping and things that people can be doing right now, taking action, because I still have to go to the grocery store for some things. We both don't grow all of our own food.
That's right.
Inflation has pretty much destroyed the food supply chain to the point where it's not going to go down.
No.
So what kind of action can people take to, prep and prepare for our food supply destruction that's currently underway?
It's underway, yeah, for sure. I've been telling people if you can just start with canning, because you can buy a pressure canner for not that much money. Several pressure canners you don't need electricity for. So if you can build a fire, you can still can, like even if you don't have electricity anymore. So I've been like, let's start with canning. The 72-hour bag is, of course, fantastic. And then...
what's in your 72-hour bag?
In my 72-hour bag. So I have it's like a tarp, but I use it as a tent.
Okay.
And then I have another one that looks like a tarp, but that's my sleeping bag for keeping me warm. I have organic survival bars in there. So those give you 1,200 calories a day for 3 days. And it's mostly fat and carbs, so you keep on going.
Okay.
And then what else do I have? I have candies for the kids. I have fire starters to get fires going quickly, because the first thing you learn in a survival class is that if you have someone freaking out in your group, build a fire and set them in front of it.
Right.
And that will calm them down a bit.
For sure.
Yeah, and then I've got clothes and a pair of shoes that are easy for running around in. I've got a little axe, a couple of different ways of starting fire, and then paracord. And what else? Oh, and then I have something super basic, but it's called a shepherd sling. And the most famous shepherd slinger was David versus Goliath. So use that to kill a squirrel or something if you need some extra food. Yeah, so I think that's most of the stuff that's in there. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Oh, I do have a bit of a bandana that shows you different edible flowers.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, especially here in Florida, there's lots of edible things that grow in everyone's backyard that people don't realize are edible, whether it's beauty berries or dandelions,
saw palmetto,
purslane. So, yeah, even, maybe that's something as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Either one of us should, I tell Liz all the time, like an entrepreneur's job is to solve problems. So,
yes.
If people are prepping or learning to prep, maybe we need to come up with a survival guide of here's plants that are in your backyard that shit hits the fan.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's all. That stuff is great. We've got a group out in Tampa with Florida Freedom Family, and they all had a Saturday get together, and they all learned how to make soap together. And I was like, well, that's a great thing to do too.
Yeah.
We all still need to be clean.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think if anyone who's watching this is just feeling, oh my goodness, this was a lot of information, where do I even start? I would start with just some of those basic books that I suggested. If you feel like you need to start becoming more kind, read the Kindness Challenge. If you need to relearn how to parent so you can be a good allo parent and parent within community, Hunt, Gather, Parent. Or if you need to start learning how to actually build your tribe, there's the Find Your People. It's a religious book. Or you can do the Build Your Village. And we just start taking baby steps forward, and we can tackle it.
And you have a list of all those books available on your website?
Yes, I do, and there are even links to Barnes & Noble where you can buy it.
And what's the website again?
It's flfreedomfam.me.
Okay. And if somebody wants to reach out to you, where's the best place they can do that?
I mean, just do it right through the website. You hit the contact thing, and you're going to get me.
Okay. And you're on... What's your social medias you're most active?
Yeah, so I'm most active, I guess, on Telegram.
Okay.
So if you look up It's FL Freedom Fam. You'll find our main channel that just has the blasts to it. If you sign up on our email list, you'll get put into our chat that's on Telegram. And then on Instagram, and it's also at FL Freedom Fam. And I'm on there too. So you can send me a DM or whatever you like to do on there.
Awesome. Well, appreciate your time as always. And if you want to find out more information, head to floridafreedomfam.me. We'll have all the links down below.
Yeah, thank
That's it.
you.
It's a great day. Catch you on the next episode.